Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are strapping in and taking an express trip to the spiritual home of smoke and peat, Islay, Scotland.
That's right. And while Islay is, famous for its legendary centuries-old distilleries, that's not our focus.
No, we are not talking about the old guard today. We are diving deep into the newest kid on the block, a newcomer that is, well, already racking up some major industry accolades. We are talking about Ardnahoe Distillery.
It really is more than just a new distillery. It's a modern success story that shows how tradition and this really intentional, forward-thinking engineering can coexist.
Absolutely.
For anyone who follows the industry, Ardnahoe's victory as the 2025 Best New Distillery at the Online Scotch Whisky Awards was a major statement.
A huge statement, especially considering the competition on Islay. So our mission today is to explore their history, yes, but mostly we want to focus on the unique technical blueprint they established.
Which is the real secret sauce here.
Exactly. And then we'll unpack the initial releases that prove that whole blueprint really works.
Well, the foundation story is genuinely compelling. It comes from a deep, deep history within the whiskey world. Ardnahoe was founded by Hunter Laing Co.
Hunter Laing, okay.
Yeah, specifically by Stuart Laing and his sons, Andrew and Scott. And for decades, the Laing family had operated as one of Scotland's most respected independent bottlers.
So they already had the expertise in what makes a great aged whiskey, but now they wanted to, create their own signature from scratch.
That's it, exactly. For years, building their own distillery was the ultimate dream, but they were determined that if they were going to do it on Islay, it had to be perfect.
No cutting corners.
None. They secured the land in 2015, and the location is it's pure gold. It sits high on the northeast corner of Islay, strategically positioned right between two colossal names, Caol Ila and Bunnahabhain.
Wow, you can almost feel the historical weight of that spot, just being sandwiched between those two titans.
It was a 9-year labor of love, involving hundreds of people from the initial vision to the first bottle. Construction started in 2016, and the timeline was remarkably swift for a project of this scale.
How swift are we talking?
The first spirit ran through the stills in October 2018. It officially opened in April 2019, making it the first new distillery on Islay in 15 years.
15 years. So that quick turnaround, that was driven by having a really clear, defined vision from day one, I assume.
Absolutely. They knew exactly what kind of spirit they wanted to produce.
Okay, let's unpack that vision. We know it's Islay, so, peat is given.
Of course.
But the goal, as we're learning, was this kind of smoked elegance, not just brute force smoke. So what technical choices did they make in the distillery design that allowed them to be the new kid on the block, but produce something so fundamentally different?
This is where the magic happens.
Yes.
And this is where the deep dive into the engineering is just absolutely critical. They made two opposing yet brilliant engineering choices that immediately defined the spirit's flavor profile. The first is their use of worm tub condensers.
No, for those who might not know, worm tubs are those traditional massive spiraling copper tubes that sit in these huge vats of cold water, right? They're incredibly rare now.
They are. Ardnahoe is the only distillery on all of Islay using them. Now, standard modern condensers, they're shell and tube, which maximize copper contact time and produce a lighter, cleaner spirit. Worm tubs condense the spirit much, much more quickly. The consequence of this reduced copper interaction is that the resulting spirit is heavier, richer, more viscous, and a lot more oily.
So that's what gives the new make spirit that substantial mouthfeel and weight.
Exactly.
So they're intentionally starting with a heavier, more complex base spirit. That's the Islay DNA amplified. But a heavy spirit like that often carries, some of the harsher elements like sulfur. How do they address that if the worm tubs minimize copper contact?
That's the contradiction. And that leads us to their second major choice, installing Scotland's longest lyne arms. The lyne arm is the pipe connecting the still to the condenser, and they're stretched an immense 24.5 feet.
Wait a minute. Okay, so you just told us the worm tubs reduce copper interaction to keep the spirit heavy.
Right.
But now they're maximizing copper interaction with these giant long line arms. Are they running the risk of stripping away the very character they just fought to preserve?
And that's the absolute genius in the Ardnahoe process. They recognize that trade-off. The long line arms force the alcohol vapors to travel a much longer distance before they even hit the worm tub.
Okay.
This extended journey creates maximal reflux, that constant cooling and reheating of the vapors inside the copper, which does a few things. First, it helps to strip away those unwanted sulfur compounds, cleaning the spirit.
Got it.
And second, crucially, it helps develop these rich, fruity, and creamy nuances.
So they're combining two things. They use the worm tubs to preserve the spirit's weight and oiliness, and then they use the long line arms to add refinement and fruitiness. It's like a dynamic conversation between heaviness and elegance.
Precisely. It's a hybrid approach, taking that heavy Islay DNA and then engineering in fruit, creaminess, and this really stunning oily texture.
That's fascinating.
And to complete the picture, we have to talk about the raw ingredients. They use heavily peated malt, clocking in around 40 parts per million, or ppm.
40 ppm. Okay, that's significant, but for listeners who don't speak ppm, what does that really mean in context?
It means it's definitely peaty, but it's not at that absolute monster level you find in some of Islay's super heavy hitters, which can push 55 or even 60 ppm.
Right.
40 ppm provides this robust, earthy smoke background, but here's the key technical move. To stop that strong peat from dominating and turning the whiskey harsh, they employ an incredibly long fermentation period.
How long?
60 to 70 hours.
Wow. And why is that time so important?
Because for a heavily peated producer, the industry average is often closer to, say, 48 or 55 hours. That extended time, sometimes over 3 days, allows the yeast to work much harder and stress a little.
And that stress is a good thing.
It is. It encourages the yeast to produce more specific esters. Esters are those fruity, often creamy compounds, and they are absolutely necessary to build the complexity and sweetness you need to balance that intense 40 ppm smoke.
So the goal isn't just smoke.
No, the goal is smoked fruit and spice.
That makes perfect sense. The engineering, the fermentation, it all points toward creating a spirit designed to be complex even at a young age. Now that we know how they built this spirit with oil, fruit, and elegance, let's see if the final product, the inaugural release, actually delivered on that promise.
The anticipation for that inaugural release in 2024 was huge, and it really had to make a statement. It was a 5-year-old single malt, bottled at a robust 50% NABV. And, importantly, it was non-chill, filtered with no added color.
Quick clarification. Why should a listener care that it's non-chill filtered? What does that mean for the experience?
It's all about retaining that body we were just talking about. Chill filtering removes some of the natural fatty acids and esters, mostly for aesthetic clarity, but those are the very elements that give the whiskey its texture and depth. By skipping that step and keeping it the 50% ABV, they ensure the rich oils created by those worm tubs actually remain in the bottle. It enhances that signature mouthfeel.
Excellent context. So what defined that powerful 5-year-old flavor profile?
The casks were a very strategic combination of ex-bourbon and Oloroso sherry fades.
Sherry fades.
Yeah, the term often refers to second fill or slightly older sherry butts. They still impart that rich, dried fruit character, but they don't completely overwhelm a delicate 5-year-old spirit.
I see.
So the nose offered that classic peat smoke, but it was immediately complemented by sweetness. Apple, vanilla, shortbread, and that lovely creme brulee note.
And that creme brulee note has to be a direct payoff from the long, slow fermentation, right?
Absolutely. The fermentation delivered the sweet richness, while the taste added depth with more sweet peat, vanilla, lemon, and a really subtle ginger spice. The finish was long, smoky, and ended on salted caramel with a light drying quality. It was a remarkably mature and complex debut.
That successful inaugural statement must have paved the way for their core range. Let's explore the 3 main ongoing expressions, starting with the one named for their water source, the Infinite Loch.
Yes, the Infinite Loch is a nod to the nearby Loch Ardnahoe, known as Islay's Infinite Lake, which supplies all their water. This is their classic, vibrant expression.
And what's the makeup of this one?
It uses first-fill bourbon and Oloroso sherry casks, also at 50% ABV. The flavor profile is defined by that classic Islay sea spray and peat, that coastal foam layered with dark chocolate.
Oh, interesting.
The vibrant taste has green fruit and this unique menthol quality, which leads to a long finish characterized by bonfire smoke and citrus zest. It's just very clean, fresh, and deeply reflective of the location.
Next, they dive into the geology with the Bolsa expression.
Right, named after the majestic Bolsa caves near the distillery. This expression leans much more heavily into the sherry influence, being mainly matured in Oloroso sherry casks.
And the spirit can handle that heavy sherry.
It can. Because the spirit has such a heavy, oily texture from the worm tubs, it can handle and integrate those powerful dark fruit notes from the sherry without becoming thin or weak.
So the technical decisions really enable the richness of the sherry. What specific notes stand out in Bolsa?
The nose is this intense rush of red fruits, roasted walnuts, and fresh orange peel, all underpinned by that elegant peat smoke. On the palate, you experience layers of raisins, sweet dates, and plums.
Seems very rich.
It's rich, almost cake-like, but it's perfectly balanced by the Islay peat, culminating in a long, spicy finish with a notable hint of black pepper and dryness.
And finally, for those who really want to taste the core distillate without much interference, they offered a cask strength edition.
The Cask Strength Batch 1 is the pure technical test. It's 5 years old, but bottled at a commanding 60.9% ABV, matured exclusively in first-fill bourbon barrels. No sherry here.
So this is where the combination of the long line arms and the worm tubs really gets to shine.
Exactly. This allows them to completely dominate the flavor.
And that high ABV is where you really experience the oily texture, I would imagine.
You do. The nose is a fresh coastal breeze, earthy peat smoke, and rich cocoa. The palate focuses heavily on orchard fruits, herbal tea, and a surprising salted caramel note. This is where you taste the complexity of the long line arms built into the spirit.
And the finish.
A massive smoky finish that still somehow retains those refined citrus nuances. It shows that even at that high proof, their whiskey maintains complexity and refinement.
They clearly put as much scientific thought into the output as they did into the engineering. But positioning a 5-year-old whiskey, even a critically acclaimed one, among absolute giants like Laphroaig, Ardbeg, and Palala, that is a monumental task.
It is. And their strategy is crystal clear. They cannot compete on volume or legacy yet. So they compete entirely on a unique, technical signature and an unwavering dedication to quality.
So it's all about that unique flavor profile.
It is. They're betting that the distinction created by the worm tubs, the long line arms, and the extensive fermentation will produce a flavor profile so unique and refined that it carves out its own indispensable space in the pantheon of Islay whiskey.
It's a new generation, really.
They represent a modern generation that respects the island's tradition, but is confident enough to use engineering to redefine it.
So bringing it all together for you, the listener, the core knowledge gain here is really understanding that dynamic tension that drives Ardnahoe's flavor.
It's the successful fusion of Islay tradition, that heavy peat, with these unique, intentional technical decisions, like the rare worm tubs and those incredibly long line arms.
All to create a spirit that is both heavy in texture and surprisingly elegant and fruity in flavor.
That's the takeaway.
This brings us to our final thought, a deeper, maybe more philosophical question about whiskey. We've spent this entire deep dive focusing on the technical wizardry, the lengths of copper, the hours of fermentation, and how human intention shapes the final product.
But Ardnahoe draws its inspiration directly from its environment. They name their spirits after the Infinite Loch, which provides their water, and the Bolsa Caves, which define their rugged coast.
So the question is...
The question is, after all the modern technology, the line arms, the steam coils, and the precise measurements, is the physical geography of a place. Its deep, mysterious lakes, its wind-battered shores, its cave-scarred coasts. Is that still the ultimate, irreplaceable ingredient?
Does the land still speak loudest?
Exactly. Is that what ultimately defines a whiskey's signature? It's something to mull over with your next dram and consider how much the place really dictates the palate.
Food for thought indeed. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into how the newest star on Islay managed to win the respect of the entire world. Until next time.